Welcome to the 3030 Health Podcast. The following discussion is for education and entertainment. It is not intended to diagnose or treat disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first discussing it with your doctor. Here is your host, Dr. Ruiz.
Hello everyone, super excited about my show today. We have another Q&A episode. Every once in a while I look at all the questions that people ask me on social media or topics that my patients might be inquiring about, and I like to discuss this with my co-host, Adam Sadowski. Before we begin this episode, let's hear a word from our sponsor. I hope you enjoy the show.
Hey there, Dr. Alan Christensen here with you. I'd love to take just a moment and tell you about our Thyroid Advisor program. So what is a Thyroid Advisor visit? Well, imagine that one of your closest friends happened to be a thyroid doctor and that they understood the conventional, the naturopathic, and all the functional approaches. You know, they just wanted you to feel better and they were happy to video chat whenever you needed them. So that's basically it. Just click the link to set up a time and the IH docs are happy to help out today.
Hello everyone, I'm here with my co-host, Adam Sadowski. Adam, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
Doing pretty good, busy at work and, seeing tons of patients, helping a bunch of people. So that's very exciting. And, wrapping up the week, and I was like, you know what? I have not recorded a podcast for this week. So why don't I call my friend Adam and we do a Q&A just to help some people that might be looking for answers for certain things. And I think we got two pretty good topics. But before we start, man, how's life? How's school going? Is your quarter about to end?
Yeah, man. So finals start next week. So it's pretty much the end of the term, finishing up some clinical rotations. And then I've got a pretty packed summer clinic-wise and just shadowing some docs. So a lot of cool things are in the works. And I'm just excited for the start of the summer.
This Saturday, the 22nd, another batch of naturopaths are graduating from SENM. So congratulations to all those kids that are, finally finishing and, getting to the end of the end of the tunnel and finally getting ready for boards. Another thing that I want to remind everyone that I like to do an interview with recent graduates just to give them a little bit of exposure and just so you guys know, anyone that's listening, that the movement, it's strong and the future looks really bright, especially with this new crop of practitioners. So very excited about that. I'm going to try to make it to the graduation and, it's very inspiring and always makes me feel really good when I see those kids walk through the stage.
Yeah, that's cool that you're going back and kind of, showing your support for graduation. I think it's a cool thing for when alumni come back, whether it's former faculty who are pretty tightly associated with schools but aren't necessarily have, clinics there. It's just cool to go back and see familiar faces or people you've heard about that are inspiring. And another thing that I forgot to mention that's pretty exciting on my end is I submitted my presentation for the AANP conference in Portland this year in August. So I'm preparing for that. So hopefully I'll have an exciting presentation for everybody to see.
I'll be there and I'll be introducing you because I'm running the scientific track. So that's exciting and I'm so proud of you. And before that, in around 47 days, we have the Ancestral Health Symposium. And I don't know if you've heard any of the live interviews that I've been doing, but next couple of weeks, I'm going to be interviewing some of the presenters on the Facebook page for the Ancestral Health Society and just showcasing some of the people that will be speaking at the conference. So, if you're interested in this paleo movement, in this ancestral movement, in this evidence-based evolutionary medicine movement, AHS is the place to be, be around the tribe and make new connections and really dig in and learn some new information that could be so beneficial for your health.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool presenters that were there when I was there, I think in 2017, and some of the presenters who were presented a couple of years ago are going to be there again this year. So it's going to be cool to catch up with people like Dr. Mike T. Nelson and Dr. Rob Abbott. So it'll be a cool time.
Yeah, and this year is going to be in San Diego. I'm going to put a link to the websites if you're interested in getting tickets and just immersing yourself in the science of this movement. So let's get to the
meat and potatoes,
the meat and bones of this show. So I've been getting a lot of questions from my patients about endocrine disruptors or toxic metal toxicity, and I kind of want to talk about that.
That's cool. And that's actually a funny coincidence because in school right now, I'm in my environmental block and pediatrics block, and we're covering a lot of those topics right now.
Yeah, so, a little background, we live in a very dirty environment. They're remodeling our office right now, and we got some furniture from IKEA, and the office smells different, and it's a necessary evil, with technology. We have to create different ways of preserving wood and to produce things at a lower cost, and sometimes adding certain chemicals to things can cause this. Now imagine all of the endocrine disruptors that we are exposed to on a daily basis. You wake up and you are putting on clothes that were washed, and sometimes, we might use fabric softeners, or, you walk into an office building and they have different perfumes or different scents that you plug into the wall, or people that wear cologne, or people that have to drive cars and maybe you're stuck in traffic, and the ozone levels and the different exhaust things that are coming out of all the cars. We are constantly surrounded by pollutants, and we have pollutants that we identify as being really toxic, and then we eliminate from the environment, but are really persistent. Things like DDT. In the past, lead was added to gasoline, and all of these pollutants are still in the environment. Within my practice, after figuring out physiology, after balancing hormones, or if someone wants to get pregnant, I usually push to check environmental toxicants. And people are usually surprised when we find out that they have certain burden of some endocrine disruptors. So I want to take some time and talk about these endocrine disruptors. Let's begin by talking about how we test, okay? We begin by testing with a challenge test using two different compounds, EDTA and DMPS. And what these two compounds do is they liberate these heavy toxic metals from the tissue, and they put them in your bloodstream. And then your kidneys kind of take care of it. They make these substances more water soluble, and then your kidneys are able to get rid of them naturally. There's a lot of literature about how effective EDTA and DMPS are for getting rid of these toxic metals. And there is a lot of blog posts and writing on the internet about how DMPS and there's a lot of writing on EDTA being like the worst substance ever. That's in context. If you are taking heavy doses of EDTA, DMPS, or DMSA without having good detoxifying pathways, you can make yourself pretty sick. And that's the reason why you need to do all of this chelation under the supervision of someone that kind of has an idea of what to do.
So for those who don't know, can you explain to them what an endocrine disruptor is?
So an endocrine disruptor is something that sits in your body and your body doesn't know how to handle it. It might resemble a different molecule. Like, for example, our thyroid uses iodine in order to make thyroid hormone. Well, these endocrine disruptors might look pretty similar to iodine, and then your body tries to grab it and use it to make thyroid hormone, and it doesn't quite fit and it doesn't work. Other endocrine disruptors are things like xenoestrogens, so things that mimic or look very similar to an estrogen compound and either attaches and activates an estrogen receptor or attaches to that estrogen receptor and it doesn't activate it. So these things are confusing our body and they're having bad effects in our body. So your body cannot use them. So your body doesn't know what to do with them, so it stores them in tissue. And in chronic cases, it can store it in bone. And once it gets to, part of your bone tissue, they're even harder to get rid of.
And what would you say is the number one source of endocrine disruptors?
Life. Yeah, there's so many, and it's funny. I've been kind of, following this story for a couple of years now, and there's certain things that I've seen, and there's certain trends. Like, for example, people from the Southwest, specifically more from like New Mexico area, the Red Rocks area, Utah, even Arizona. We see a lot of like radon being accumulated, and that's probably from the radiation that those rocks are emitting. As you could imagine, people from Michigan tend to accumulate a little bit more lead. In Arizona, I see a lot of arsenic, and there's some arsenic in our water. And then there's a couple of things, like, for example, cesium and other like more radioactive barium. I see accumulated in people that have had multiple surgeries or multiple images. And then things like cadmium, really prevalent in people that either smoked, lived in a house of someone who used to smoke, or were in the presence of someone that smoked through secondhand smoking. So cadmium, usually I can, when I get the cadmium, I feel like a fortune teller, because like, does anyone in your house smoke, or did you used to smoke? And they're like, yeah, how do you know? And the cadmium. So those things, can be pretty predictable. And then you get, people that maybe ate a lot of canned fish in the 80s, and then you can see elevations in mercury. That's why it's so important to try to eat the cleanest fish that you can. I'm not against eating fish. I'm against eating dirty fish. And then within that, trying not to eat apex predators or predators that are higher on the food chain, things like shark or tuna, or not overdoing on that, and keeping to the lower level animals in the food chain, like sardines, like things that are not going to bioaccumulate over many years. So I see those trends too. And sometimes it's things that we just can't really put our finger on. People that maybe lived in a house that had lead paint, it could have high levels of lead. One that was pretty surprising was a person who had a lot of titanium. And it turned out that it was one of those hip replacements where it was metal on metal, and that was leaching. And the reason he wanted testing was because he had received a class action suit. And he didn't care about that money or whatever. He just wanted to know if he had been affected physiological with these high levels of titanium and chromium. We ran the test, and sure enough, that he was high for both of those metals. So pretty accurate, that testing. So those are the biggest endocrine disruptors. And then being able to get rid of them, you have to challenge. You have to have one of these substances that are going to be chelating or eliminating these metals from the tissue and safely detoxing. The saying is you have to detox, not retox, because we don't want someone to give you a bunch of chelating agents and then you flush your system with these toxic metals, but then your detoxifying pathways are not active, and then you end up retoxing. And that's what we see when people are taking heavy doses of DMSA or EDTA without having a way of counterbalancing these things. Another thing that I've noticed is that these chelating agents can also deplete you of zinc, can also deplete you of copper, can also deplete you of iron, and you can exacerbate different conditions by not doing a responsible chelating protocol.
So what kind of conditions can you exacerbate?
Well, like deficiencies in zinc, copper, anemia. You can exacerbate things like osteoporosis, because people think of osteoporosis in just calcium, but there are so many different minerals that are needed for, like calcium. One that comes to mind right now is strontium, very underappreciated mineral that is necessary to build the scaffolding of your bones. And if you're not eating a nutrient-dense diet, sometimes you need to add a couple of these trace minerals in order for you to be able to build that muscle. At the same time, if you have a lot of metal toxicity where you're depositing lead or depositing other types of heavy metals into your bones, you're going to have brittle bones. And if you don't do an appropriate chelation, you are going to get rid of the lead, but you're also going to get rid of some of the trace minerals, and you're going to get in trouble. Yeah.
So you've been throwing around this term detoxifying, and I just wanted you to kind of clarify, what do you mean by detoxifying?
So lots of memes and lots of things on the internet about, you've probably seen them that says, oh, my detox, I don't need a detox diet because I have kidneys and a liver. Well, sure, yeah, your kidneys and the liver are doing the hard work. But what happens when you have fatty liver disease? What happens when your kidneys are not working properly because maybe they are too busy detoxifying sugar or detoxifying protein because you're being a dummy and not eating your right diet? What happens when they are so taxed with these other things, endocrine disruptors in the form of heavy metals or estrogen compounds? What happens when maybe you're doing improper hormone replacement therapy and you're maybe taking oral estrogens, and that's just saturating your liver? What happens when you wake up in the morning and you put some MCT oil on your coffee, and now your liver has to worry about these high levels of MCT and not detoxifying these toxic metals? So first we have to create an environment where detoxifying is efficient, and then we can start worrying about detoxifying heavy metals.
Okay, so how do you think that you would support this sort of detoxification process?
Very simple. A very good way of optimizing detox pathways is to have a little bit of a calorie restriction. And that can get hairy because if you go into too much of a calorie restriction, then you start down-regulating hormones. So you have to be smart about it. And what happens is that if you do a little bit of a calorie restriction, whether it's intermittent fasting or somehow, lowering your caloric load, now your liver doesn't have to worry too much about processing calories or processing things like fructose or MCTs or all of the different things that the liver has to detoxify. Having good levels of protein is super necessary for detoxification. So not having adequate levels of proteins prevents the liver from being able to detoxify. So it's a nice balance of maybe a calorie restriction with appropriate levels of protein, so like a protein sparing fast. Some people have problems in their detoxification pathways where they're not able to handle homocysteine and methionine, and helping those individuals with maybe, Chris Masterjohn has been writing extensively about this lately and using riboflavin to helping with that. Also, you can bypass the whole system and give some appropriate levels of glutathione. For people that are not dairy sensitive, drinking some whey protein has all the precursors for glutathione and increases your glutathione levels in the blood, and that can help with detoxification. So being able to do all of those things and setting the stage for appropriate detoxification can be very important. Another thing, we talked, I mentioned a little bit about your kidneys having to filter a lot of things like protein and sugars and water-soluble compounds. So if you have hyperglycemia or high levels of glucose, or if you have high blood pressure, helping the kidneys become more efficient at filtering is going to aid in the process of detoxification. So having good blood pressure, reducing sugar intake and reducing your overall burden on your kidneys by doing everything and anything possible, whether it's lifestyle, whether it's supplementation, to lower your blood pressure, is very, very important. And funny enough, early in my career, I had a patient that was trending downwards on his kidney function. So I was following him pretty closely, and his kidney function was in the 60s, flirting with, going into kidney failure. And I remember calling Dr. Alan Christensen, and I was like, hey, I have this patient. This is what he's presenting with. And he asked me, have you run any heavy metal testing? And we did, and we found some heavy metals. We began to chelate him, and little by little, his kidney function started coming back.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I was like, whoa, this is pretty amazing.
Now, did you do any other treatments for that patient, or was it strictly that? Was there possibly some sort of confounder?
Angie Alt said that line that I don't care if it was a confounder. I really don't care. We had started with diet. We had started with lifestyle. Doing diet and checking hormones and all of that. But his kidney function kept trending downward. And that's something that doesn't change overnight. So I had been seeing him for a couple of months. And once we start chelating him, his kidney function began to come back. So again, does not say that if you have kidney failure, you should do chelation, but it's something that you can discuss with your functional medicine practitioner. That could be, another thing that you can add to your arsenal in order to help with kidney function.
Yeah, and I mean, this whole podcast is for educational purposes only.
Totally. And other things that you can help with detoxification. And this is where my questions are coming from. So again, there's a lot of information about people doing some damage to themselves by ordering some DMSA from Amazon and taking huge amounts. One of my dear friends did that himself, and he ended up pretty, having a sulfur intolerance for many, many years after, and I'm gonna have him tell the story, but in short, he had some mercury amalgams, and he read about how they were so awful. Went to a dentist, they drilled them out, no protection or anything. He started feeling worse, so he started reading, and he said, I need to chelate myself. Order some DMSA from eBay, I think, and started taking massive amounts of DMSA, and he made himself so sick, ended up having like a histamine intolerance, and had to basically nurse himself back to health. And I'm gonna have him tell that story next time I have him on the show. But that stuff, it can be pretty gnarly. So there is some truth to that. And because there are these writings, we also hear about things like cilantro, or things like clays, or zeolites, or chlorella. All of these things act as binders, and very, very significant differentiation between binders and chelating agents. Binders bind, and some of these binders are very effective at binding things that are circulating in your bloodstream, or things that are in your gut while you're eating. They are very effective. Activated charcoal, very effective at binding these things and getting rid of them. But unfortunately, these binders don't actually sequester from the tissue. So you can be taking all the chlorella in the world, you can be taking a lot of activated charcoal, and you are going to bind some of these heavy metals, but you're not going to be able to chelate them from the tissue. I was talking to someone online, and they had talked about zeolites, and that's a big topic right now. And I actually kind of went a little nerdy, and I started looking at a lot of literature on this topic. And very effective and very safe. The zeolites are this type of compounds that can be derived from many different things, some clays and some vegetables and things like that. And it's a very big molecule. It stays in your intestine pretty well, has an affinity for toxic metals, and has no affinity or very little affinity for sodium and potassium. And this is really, really good because it makes them very, very safe. The problem is that they're not going into the cellular tissue and getting the toxic metal or the heavy metal from the tissue. So I was looking at, this the zeolites, and I was looking at all of the references, and I was reading this paper that talked about the safety of this compound. It went, animal studies. That was a meta-analysis, and it was talking about animal studies, and it was talking about human studies and how safe they were. And I agree, they're pretty safe. And then there was a paragraph about how they have the potential to be chelating agents, and that perked my ears. So I started looking at the references. And couple of things, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but like this one reference was a study done by a company that makes a product, and that kind of gives me pause. And then the second thing was that there was no significant correlation between the people that took the zeolites for 7 days or 30 days in their excretion of toxic metals. So whether you took it or not, or placebo, there was no significant difference between them. They did have a spike, a non-significant spike in excretion of toxic metals on day 4, but after that, that spike disappeared, and it was the same. So this paper, again, let's look at science and let's look at the levels of evidence, suggested that possibly zeolites could be a different way of chelating toxic metals. But that's the extent of the research on this type of compound. So it could be we need more research, and at this point, there was no significant relationship between using zeolites and actually taking metals or toxic compounds from the tissue into the bloodstream for your kidneys to get rid of. Yeah, so my thoughts are this. Chelation works, but you have to be very careful. You have to be careful in setting up the environment for a good detoxification protocol. So do you have your detoxifying pathways in tip-top shape? Are they working? 2, if you are doing chelation, because chelation is not as safe as binders, make sure you're hydrating. Make sure you're doing the highest dose you can tolerate, and make sure that at the end of every chelating event, after 6 hours, you do some electrolytes, you maybe replenish your minerals. So some zinc, some strontium, some calcium, all of these things.
And make sure you're also doing it under the guidance of a medical provider.
Totally. Yeah. And with products that are clean, that are not coming from China or whatever, And then third, during that 6-hour period, and I keep referring to 6 hours because that's the half-life of the EDTA and the MPS. During that 6-hour period, and maybe for longer, you can take some binders to help grab onto those toxic metals and help you get rid of them. So that would be a good strategy. And then in order of preference for these binders, things like zeolites could be a good option, or doing a little bit of activated charcoal, or maybe some just good old fiber, having some good levels of fiber, acacia fiber, or even if you can tolerate it, some good old psyllium husk. Make sure you're pooping. Make sure you don't have a lot of constipation, because if we have different pathways of detoxification. We have your kidneys. We can poop some of it. Make sure you don't have any constipation. You can exponentially increase your rate of detoxification by doing something like sauna, and that can be very effective at detox. So there's many different ways that we can help the detoxification process and make it safe. So in short, DMSA and EDTA can be pretty gnarly. They can, if you don't do it right. Having a good protocol for detoxification encompasses your ability to detoxify, your ability to chelate, your ability to bind and not retox, and then supplement the good things that you might have lost during your chelation process. And I know there's a lot of confusion, and I know there's a lot of information, but I have seen a lot of patients go from, from pretty, fatigued and tired and they're doing everything right. And the last piece of the puzzle was getting rid of these toxic metals. And then we can talk about all of the things in our house that can be toxic to us.
So do you think there's someone who would make for a better candidate over someone else to look into this?
Someone that has been flipping stones and have a lot of things in line already. So someone that has good sleep habits, someone that has cleaned their diet, someone that has good blood sugar control, good blood pressure, someone that can manage their stress, someone that has investigated their hormones. Because I think that's, like jumping over all of these things that are a little bit less risky and a little bit better controlled and that can have a bigger impact. Like for example, sleep. Sleep has a huge impact on your health. And if you're not eating right, if you're not sleeping right, if your thyroid is all fucked and you want to chelate lead, yeah, it's not going to be a home run. So let's try to peel that onion. Let's get that sleep under control. Let's have a solid diet. Let's start exercising, maybe some meditation. If you want to start with maybe some sauna, some red light therapy. And then after you've clicked all those boxes, if there's still something that's bothering you, then start investigating toxic metals. And even before that, the things in your house and your environment that could be causing some disruption would be drinking clean water. Maybe you're drinking some water straight from the faucet that is full of arsenic here in Arizona. Make sure you get a water filtration system. If you have a very high intolerance for environmental toxicants, if you get headaches whenever you walk by one of those perfume stores at the mall, maybe you need to eliminate all those fragrances from your house first, switching from a not so organic soap to a more glycerin-based soap. Funny story, I'm horrible when it comes to that kind of stuff. I still use regular deodorant. I still use regular toothpaste. But if I use conventional soap, I get so itchy and I get so, just itchy and uncomfortable. And for 30 years of my life, I thought that was just normal. That after you take a shower, you get out of the shower and you just scratch your chest for a couple of minutes and then it goes away. And then I started buying, this glycerin soaps that you see at the store just because they smell cool. And all of a sudden, I started noticing that I wasn't scratching anymore after a shower. And it took me a couple of, months to realize, like something that you don't notice. And then I was on vacation somewhere and, I just used the soap at the hotel room or whatever. And I got out of the bathroom. I was like, man, I'm so itchy. And sure enough, got back home and I stopped having to scratch after taking a hot shower. And it took me a couple of months because I'm not too bright to realize that using that type of, like Broners or those goat milk or glycerin soaps basically fixed the problem for me.
Here's a board question for you. What pathology is commonly associated with itchiness after a hot bath or shower?
I know this one, and it's a type of blood disorder where their platelets start breaking up, and I can't remember the name of it.
Polycythemia vera, ring a bell?
Yeah, polycythemia vera. Yeah, it makes you itchy after a hot shower, and pretty pathognomonic for polycythemia vera. And I need to be better about this environmental factors, So going around the house, getting rid of anything that produces a fake smell, those things that you plug on the wall, which I used to love, but they create a lot of estrogen containing compounds, and I love my testosterone more than I love my house smelling like lavender.
Roses.
Yeah. So I got rid of those. An easy one for anyone out there. If you haven't switched your food containers from plastic food containers to glass food containers, that's something that is very convenient and very easy, and you won't miss. Those plastic food containers, they smell bad and they trap odors and they trap, different stains. So they're not even that sanitary, and having a glass container is much, much better. And that's something that you can do this weekend and really help your overall health. getting a good filtration system for your water, and you can get really fancy and get a filter for your shower head. And that can eliminate some of the problems with like skin breakouts or itchiness after taking a shower. Carpet, not the best. Just imagine all this plastic, and you're walking around it, and usually it's found in bedrooms. So now you're sleeping on carpet. A big one is detergents, and specifically fabric softeners. Fabric softeners have really high levels of endocrine disruptors, and it stinks because I really love having easy to iron or soft clothes, and there's really no substitute for some fabric softener. But again, I prefer having high levels of testosterone than having man boobs.
So then, to play devil's advocate here, and I guess we could wrap it up too, because we are coming pretty short on time. What would you say is the point in treating this if we're constantly exposed to these things?
I talk about stress a lot and how we need to manage our stress. And we have stressors that we can control, and we have stressors that we cannot control. I enjoy having a car, and that allows me to go places. Unfortunately, I cannot control traffic or other cars' emissions. So by me maybe stopping the fabric softener and stopping the environmental pollutants within my house is allowing me to have resilience to not have an asthma attack when I go to work and I have a 40-minute commute. Also, if you have, we focus a lot on diet. And if you've been paleo, ancestral, eating clean, or whatever you want to call it, and you are still not feeling 100% like yourself, it could be that these endocrine disruptors are at the bottom of what's making you sick. Remember, we aim to remove obstacles to health. I've been having like an influx of people with migraines. And when you start talking about migraines and you start talking about triggers for migraines, it is not rare to hear strong smells trigger it. And then you can ask well, what about do essential oils trigger it? No, not essential oils. What about if someone is cooking? No, not when someone's cooking. What kind of smells? And they go, well, perfumes. Well, laundry detergents. So now you can start seeing how these endocrine disruptors or these toxic metals could be affecting so many different pathways that we don't even understand. Old school naturopaths, if you look at at the teachings of people like Dr. Cronin, you know what they used to use for to help you detoxify?
What's that?
Pringles.
Like the chips?
Yeah. Pringles made with Olestra. Pringles made with Olestra. You know what Olestra is?
No.
So Olestra is a fake fat that was developed in the 80s. And it's basically...
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, so there's this fat that you can't absorb. So the treatment, after having chelation or after trying, was eating 10 Olestra Pringles, which would kind of give you a little bit of diarrhea, and then you would just flush everything out.
Interesting. So what are some resources that you think people can look at to further educate themselves about it?
Trying to read about endocrine disruptors, and you can just go on PubMed and top, you can read about BPAs or xenoestrogens or, all of these things, So it's boring to try to learn, unless you're a medical student, and it's boring to try to learn about the effects of BPAs or even the BPA substitutes. So we'll get BPAs are horrible for you. So people stop buying BPA containing products, and then the industry reacts and they create something that is BPA free, but they need BPA-like structures in order for you to make plastics. So they make another structure that is not BPA, but is very similar, and we don't know the environmental impact that those structures are going to have. So we don't know, okay? So maybe that can be boring, or maybe that doesn't interest you, and maybe you need more actionable things that you can do. And one of my favorite websites is the Environmental Working Group. Have you ever visited that website?
Yeah, I have.
They have this catalog where you can put in all of your cosmetics, all of your shampoos and conditioners and all of that, all of your cleaning products, and it gives you a rating on how toxic they might be. And that, to me, that's more actionable than actually trying to understand, or trying to read the research on this environmental disruptors. But, look at what's happening in Flint. Look at, fertility rates in Flint. Look at delays in education. Look at all of these things that are happening in this place that has high levels of lead. Look at what happens when you have high levels of mercury. Now, imagine what happens when you have low levels of these contaminants that maybe they're not overtly causing mental delays or vomiting or all these things, but they're still in your system. And maybe that's one of those things that I'm not being 1,000% evidence-based, but I would rather be safe than sorry. And I want to keep my house as clean as possible, because being clean is not going to cause me any harm. And having all of these pollutants and all these environmental factors, they might very well keep me unhealthy.
So what are some resources people can look into if they want to try to get treatment or work with a doctor who's better at sort of dealing with environmental issues, health-related issues?
That's a $1,000 question. It's going to be talking to your doctor and talking to someone that has some environmental medicine understanding, talking to your doctor and asking, do you work with DMSA and EDTA? Are you replenishing zinc and other trace elements that are lost during chelation? What is the plan? Do you have a pre and post detoxification plan? Meaning, are you just, giving me an IV and then hoping for the best? Or do you have a plan to continue chelating? Another funny thing that happens when you chelate is that you remove the environmental toxic levels from the tissue first. And then once that tissue space is open, then your body starts mobilizing from the bone into the tissue. So let me repeat that again. So you put this heavy metals into the tissue, fat tissue, muscle, stuff like that. You chelate that first. And then the stuff that was embedded into the bone kind of moves away from the bone and it embeds into the tissue. So sometimes when we retest, we see that the first test, you had a burden of lead of, 4 or 5 or 6 or 10, and then you do a series of chelating treatments. The patient is feeling better, and then you retest, and now it's 12 or 14, and people can get frustrated because they're like, what happened? Why did this chelation increase my levels of lead or mercury in my urine? Well, because you're moving the burden from the bone into the tissue. So by creating that space, you're actually liberating some of these toxic metals, and now you are taking it away from the most difficult place to take it out, which is the bone, which is a good thing. So the overall burden is decreased with every chelation. That's why I don't test right away. I don't retest right away. I do a challenge test. I do a series of IVs. I wait a couple of months. I do once I know that those detox pathways are open, I do a little bit of DMSA with some glutathione support and some good electrolyte support and some mineral trace support. And then I wait a couple, and then I retest again. And that's when we see how that burden has decreased. So, tons of information, and I think that this is a really hot topic right now, especially in people that have advanced understanding of this health movement, meaning people that have been doing it for a while, that have the diet down pat, that have the lifestyle down pat, and then you start getting into detox pathways and environmental medicine, and that's why I wanted to bring it up.
That's a cool thing. I think at Ancestral Health Symposium this year, there's actually one doctor who's going to be talking a little bit more about that.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Do you remember who it was?
I think it was Dr. Anne-Marie Fine. She's, I think, from your neck of the woods.
Yeah. She is. Yeah. And the importance of having, a good environment. Yeah. Especially, one more thing, before we leave. I did mention it briefly that before, if I have a patient that comes, and they're getting better and they decide that they want to have a baby, I'm pretty adamant about testing for metals because I want to create the best environment for that baby. And if you have toxic metals and you have high levels of metals, and having a kid in your body, surrounded by metals, that's not a good thing. So I try to do some chelation. I try to, normalize the levels. I do the testing, and then I repeat the testing really fast. And then I stop the chelation, and I wait a couple of months, and now you can, and now I give the okay to start the pregnancy process. But very important to make sure that if you are considering taking on that responsibility of bringing another human being to this world, just for safety and for the sake of that child, I would really look into removing some of those toxic metals from the system.
Have you seen anybody who's tried to get pregnant, but they didn't have any success until they did some sort of chelation protocol?
No. Usually the patients that I see are endocrinology patients, so most of the people, you fix their thyroid, man, you look at them the wrong way and they get pregnant. So most of the people that I have, have high levels of antibodies or are hypothyroid, and fixing that, basically, their periods normalize, and their cycle is better, and you have some weight loss, and you can see that everything is ready to have a baby. But I do make a strong argument about doing a little bit of chelation before that happens.
That's actually really funny because on the AIP diet study that Dr. Rob Abbott and Angie Alt and I did, that we talked about, I think, in a couple episodes ago, what we had to actually release one of the participants in the study because that participant was able to actually get pregnant after we were able to help her out with lifestyle interventions for her Hashimoto's.
Yeah, and it's a pretty consistent story, and something that needs, and it's on the literature. It's up to date, which is like a database for practitioners. It has an extensive article on the importance of good thyroid levels, and then it's really cool because within pregnancy, the TSH range kind of goes a little bit lower and closer to the optimal levels that we practice in functional medicine. So it is well understood in the literature that when you're trying to get pregnant, having the TSH levels be between 0.5 and I think in the literature it's quoted as 2, 0.5 and 2, and even a little bit hyper is beneficial to help people get pregnant.
Awesome, man. Well, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Again, how's the website going? Are you creating content? How can people find you? And are you going to be at AHS this year?
Yeah, man, I will be at AHS. I will be there with you and Dr. Abbott. The website is coming along. Content is being created, and it's just a matter of having enough content to share with everybody. And what was the other question?
And then how can people get a hold of you?
Right. So people can get a hold of me on my Instagram at script2lift, SCRIPTTOLIFT.
And I guess I'll be seeing you in around 46 days.
That fast, huh?
That fast, man. It's coming fast.
I still haven't booked my flight, so I got to get on that.
You can walk. You can start walking now, and maybe you'll make it.
Oh boy! Well, I got to take my finals first.
Yeah, and then I'll be seeing you in Portland, Oregon, for the ANP conference, and that's gonna be fun.
That's gonna be a lot of fun. It'll be fun having you come back.
Yeah, we get to be roomies again.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man.
Yeah, it should be fun. Okay, Adam. Well, good luck with finals, and I'll talk to you soon, man.
Thanks, man. It was always a pleasure.